God, how long has it been? How long has it been since you guys have seen me solo on a recording? Oh man, solo on a live show. It has been a while, folks. But I decided that I wanted to roll out my newest, concept, my newest idea. And it's something that I wanted to start up in 2022, but I felt like it was the right time. I feel like Fantasy Intervention is making all the right moves. We're growing, we're expanding, and some of these other people are curious how they can kind of get into play. So I decided that right now would be the perfect time to launch this new concept. Yeah, I'm excited for it. This new concept is all about how to get into the fantasy football industry. I know it's called How to Start a Podcast, but that's just the side that I kind of specialize in. So I wanted to dive in that heavier. But this will be a multi-part series. We might do this for, I don't even know, a year, 2 years, forever, and just talk about the progress that we've had in each and every step of the way. So it's a new series. I'd love to invite some people in. So if you specialize in somewhere like writing, maybe you're an editor for a certain company, or maybe you just started writing and you want to talk a little bit about it, I would love to have guests in here and kind of explore where certain people have thrived in the industry, where they've actually came up a little bit. So yeah, make sure you guys don't miss out on this series. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've got a lot of special guests who've already agreed to be on the show. I can't wait to bring them in over the next few weeks. Yes, don't miss out. Make sure you guys hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasy intervention. But let's go ahead and get this episode kicked off, because we're going to do our little entry episode. Yeah, we got to talk about what we're going to do, right? Let's do it.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
What's going on, guys? Welcome on into Fantasy Intervention. This is a special episode. I want to sit here and I want to talk about what it was like for me to get into the industry, and how some people that might want to look into getting into the industry can kind of, learn off of my experiences, learn off my fuck ups, learn off of everything that I've done well and what I've done horribly. So like I said, this is going to be a week-to-week progression of how we've been doing and how Fantasy Intervention is growing, and how you guys can grow in the industry as well and kind of learn your way into the program. So if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I will answer them throughout the show. Hopefully it's something that we can cover this week, if not in future weeks as well. But there's good things and there's bad things with me doing this. Sitting there and looking at it, the good aspect is that I started from scratch. I didn't even own a laptop until May of 2019. So if you're somebody that has no idea what you're doing, you guys can learn from me, learn from my mistakes, learn from everything that I've done progression-wise in order to make sure that I've worked my way up and succeeded in this industry, at least to this point. I still have a long way to go. Of course, Fantasy Intervention has a long way to go, but we're getting it. We're understanding how to do things. So you can take my experiences, learn from them, either do them the same way, alter it a little bit, or don't do it that way at all. At least I get to share with you guys, and y'all can relate with me. For the people that have no idea what the hell they're doing over here, that's where I came from, and it's been a fun ride. But the bad aspect about this is sitting there and looking at the fact that I had no idea what I'm doing, and still am learning throughout the process. So although I might have succeeded doing it a certain way, there could be an easier way, and that's why networking is absolutely one of the most important things you can do in this industry. Luckily, I have networked, and I have brought friends on the industry, and I brought friends on the team, which I cannot wait to announce. The co-owners of Fantasy Intervention, whatnot. That's coming very soon. But these people have kind of guided me and helped me, work my way throughout this process, whether it be the images, the podcast, the recording, the information, making sure that somebody's there when you're having a bad day. All these things are very, very crucial to developing, your own brand and the brand of other companies. So I will actually get to this question, Neil, but I want to make sure that I go ahead and, like I said, line up these questions and address what's going on with me and how I got to where I'm at. Because a little bit about me, when I hit 18, I decided to go up and start up my own company, not off intentions. I just was hanging out at a gas station. I was waxing cars on the side, paying the lady like $25 to set up there. I was making like $100 a week or something waxing cars. No big deal. And then I realized that somebody's like, I'll just buy the can off you, instead of you waxing cars. I was like, cool, you can buy the can off me. And then I realized it was a lot easier just to sell the product instead of doing all the work towards it. So I ended up building up a company. We, over the next 6 to 7 years, opened up 6 of them. So I have a little bit of experience with opening up companies, managing people. We had almost 400 employees or so in 4 different states. So it was something that was, stretching me thin, but at least I have the experience in order to do it. Now, this is completely different from fantasy football, from the social media aspect of things, all the way through the advertisement aspect of things. I'm used to talking to people face to face and interacting with them. Meanwhile, I have to do this, all over, I guess, Twitter and Facebook. So it's a completely different animal. I am learning a new route to do things. But with that being said, after I ended up moving on from my companies, sold half and the other few ended up going under, but I moved over to bartending. I just partied pretty much for the next 7 years and built up relationships with people in that aspect. So that was a different way to kind of go about things, of course. But I just always had this passion where I wanted to get back into that entrepreneurial mindset. Like I wanted to go attack something, firsthand. I didn't want to work for anybody else. It's kind of why I like bartending to an extent, was because you kind of make your own schedule. You kind of get to work the amount of hours that you want to work, etc. But anyways, I was brought into this company. It was a craft cocktail bar. We had over 500 different liquors. It was supposed to be like a 4-star Michelin type establishment. And it was great and all, but I didn't have the freedom that I wanted. And I want to get right back into where I was before with the entrepreneurial mentality. So I came off and I was like, listen, I want to get back into fantasy football. I want to get into entertainment. So I decided to go back to a previous bartending job, where I could actually, work about 120 hours a week, build up a bank. And then I decided to go and start up a podcast. I just bought my own equipment, ended up, just kind of winging it. I was listening to an Ask Me Anything over there for the fantasy footballers. And Jason's like, yeah, we just decided to do it one day. We're just like, hey, if we're going to do it, we need to do it. And that kind of inspired me. Literally that day went on, bought a mic, bought a soundboard, bought a camera. I didn't even need all this stuff. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I went out and did it. And that was the most important thing, was actually investing in yourself. So bringing this question up, Neil asked, what was the reasonable startup budget for equipment beyond a desktop? And that's a great question, because I wasn't sure either. I reached out to a few friends, because being in the bar industry, you obviously have friends that DJ and whatnot. I had one that was actually in the radio industry. So he hooked me up with a cheaper mic, which, by the way, this is a newer NW700. That's NEEWER NW-700. So this might cost me, I think, anywhere from like 30 to 50 bucks, somewhere along those lines. You don't have to get a soundboard, but I believe a soundboard does help out. However, a lot of the stuff I found out you can actually do on your computer, like sound quality wise. So you don't have to get a soundboard. So you're talking about having a platform to start up a podcast, which is something like Anchor, which is free, by the way, and then a mic. And that's pretty much all you need. So that's just starting out. Obviously, that's to get your feet wet and to have a little bit of fun with it. I definitely recommend getting a mic so you don't sound like you're, in a hallway shouting, towards your computer. But just to answer your question, that is essentially how cheap it is to start up a podcast. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it, because I had to build up a bank. I had to put time into it. I had to make sure that everything is flowing. So it's not just starting up a podcast and doing it. You have to make sure you're consistent across the board. You have to make sure that you're doing things on a regular basis. But that's going to be held for a future episode, because I want to pretty much get back to, I guess, starting up a company. Essentially, in 2018, when I decided to move back to this other bartending shift, and I decided to try and pursue, doing a podcast or creating some sort of entertainment value, I went from being extrinsically motivated into intrinsically motivated, which is very important. Essentially, extrinsically motivated is something where you're motivated by numbers, right? You're motivated by trying to beat something. You're motivated by money, by fame, by other aspects of things. Intrinsically motivated is something like, oh, this makes me feel good. This makes me happy. This makes me want to do it, and you continuously want to do it because you're not motivated by other, I guess, things on the outside that could affect you. It's more of something that's coming from within. So the reason why I kind of shifted that viewpoint was because I ended up rereading a book that was called Who Moved My Cheese? And essentially that book was built to kind of say like, hey, you have to be comfortable with adapting to certain things. But I took it a whole different way when I was younger. I read it when I was like 20 or so. And I was like, oh man, this book is all about just trying to go out and do more, trying to go out and set records, trying to go out and create, new things that don't exist. And that's not really what the book was about. And when I reread it, I was like, man, I took this a completely different way. And I'm glad that I took it that way at the time because it's part of what made me successful. But in the same sense, it's more about just being comfortable with what you're doing around you and trying to, I guess, adapt to certain situations. For example, we just went through a little bit of a different situation where I had two owners that were part of Fantasy Intervention. They recently decided to move on. So I had to adapt, adjust, and still be comfortable with everything going on. Yeah, the first day, I was freaking out. I was pissed off. I was confused. I had no idea what was going on. I completely blindsided me. But in the same sense, it allowed me to, adjust, take a deep breath. And by Monday night, I forgot it even happened. It's all about, like Jeff said over here, challenge, adapt, and improve your situation. So essentially, once I reread that book, that's where I realized that I wanted to do this. And sitting there and trying to do it because you're trying to create a fantasy football company isn't the right mentality when you're trying to get into this. The right mentality is doing something that you love and wanting to continuously do it and being motivated to write articles every week or to do podcasts every week. And they sit there and stick with it. Because sometimes, occasionally, it's going to feel like work. But if it makes you happy in the long run, that's something that's gonna stick with you, and it's gonna make you want to continue to succeed. So, is it a bad thing, by the way, to be extrinsically motivated? Absolutely not. It's absolutely not a bad thing. I went through most of my life doing that, and it's made me very successful. However, when it comes to doing stuff like this, where it's more, I guess, grinding and trying to create your own route in order to get there, it's something where you got to be motivated from your heart. You got to be motivated from something else other than continuously being successful. And that's the problem with our generation as a whole, is because we want immediate reward. And that's not what this is going to get you. It takes time, it takes effort, and eventually some people will end up breaking through if they work hard enough. So let's go ahead and talk about, what do I have up next? Not caring about, I guess, the numbers and some of the stuff that does motivate other people, such as follows, such as, getting the clicks or getting the recognition for writing articles, like that type of stuff. Listen, like when you have these motivations, you have these things, these drives inside, you have to sit back and you have to realize that you're not always going to get followers for every post you do. You're not always going to get the recognition for every post you do. I can't tell you how many times I came up with the concept and 2 or 3 weeks later, I saw it all over ESPN. And I'm like, dude, I've been saying this, and trying to get my articles out on it. And it never actually gained any traction. It's pretty much going to be hit or miss business. The more posts you do, the more articles that you write, the more exposure you try and gain, as long as it's quality, you have a higher chance of hitting. Mike, by the way, I see your post about the stickers, and I actually have something coming up for you here. But essentially, it's something as to where the more content that you put out, the harder you work, the more times you give yourself an opportunity to be seen, the more times you will get seen. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into this and give you my first piece of actual advice. And if you're going to decide you're going to do it, just go out and do it. Go buy a mic. Go spend the money. At least you have a little bit of, equity into the game now. Now you feel like you have to go record it. If you don't ever go buy anything, if you ever don't just go do it, then you're never going to do it. So as soon as this show gets done, just get on Amazon. Go spend $30, $50 on a mic and just try and record. You're going to suck. It's going to be really bad. But the more that you edit, the more you get things correct, and the more that you start to find your grind or your lane, the more successful you're going to be long-term. And it just takes practice. It takes practice. It takes practice. I can't talk about this enough, about how many times I've had to go through and edit episodes over and over and over and over again. You should have seen how many times I said in my first episode. It was an hour long. And I swear to God, I said every, 10 seconds or so. It takes time. It takes practice. So regardless if that's writing, if that's podcasting, if that's on Twitter, whatever it is, it just takes practice. And you need exposure in order to do that. Now, there's no wrong way to go about it. All right. You can get frustrated no matter which way it is, but there's no wrong way to go about, sitting there and trying to get out your content. I've seen it with Twitter threads. I've seen it with Facebook mentoring. You can actually go on and sign up to be a mentor of a certain group. I've seen it with Instagram Live and their stories. I've seen people that submitted their Google Docs to me, which I think is impressive because you're not writing for any company. You're literally writing for yourself and you have nobody to guide you. And this fantasy football industry can be tricky as to where, you have certain guidelines and whatnot. So, I mean, even Google Docs is actually extremely impressive when it comes to trying to, I guess, find writers that don't have that much experience. So when you sit there and you have your opportunities to gain exposure, take your opportunities and do what you can with them, but always try to make sure that you improve. That's the biggest thing that a lot of us look for when trying to build a team. So sitting there, me personally, the way that I got started and the way that I started a podcast was I was into like 10 to 14 leagues when I first did this. And I made a show about what I was going to do and why I was going to do it in each one of my leagues. So that way, if they wanted to beat me, because I think I won like, let's just say, I think it was like 11 actually. Out of the 11, I think I won like 6 or 7 of those championships. So I'm like, hey guys, if you want to beat me, I'm going to be doing a show about this. So you guys can know my moves before I do them. You guys can know how much fab I'm going to put down before I do them. So there's always ways to gain traction. There's always ways to do this. And there's always ways to practice, of course. Now, do I kind of regret telling them all my secrets? Yeah, but it's all right. Shit happens. You just got to figure out your route and the way that you want to go about doing it. But every time I got an additional listen, per week, I got stoked. And I remember the first time that I hit 100 listens in a week. It was like, I was stoked. I was like, oh my God, I have 100 people that listen to the show every single week. I mean, keep in mind, I was doing like 4 or 5 episodes a week. So it was really only like 20 people per show. But still, I mean, it was exciting for me. And it was something that almost made me feel like I finally was earning something. I was finally gaining traction. I was finally moving. So although you might not have a lot of people that catch your attention first with your Twitter threads or your articles in Google Docs, you might not get the recognition, you might get turned down. Keep your head up, because the more that you grind, the more that you do it, the more people are going to catch on, and every additional person counts. Even if that additional person was your mom, it's cool. All right. So the majority of the points that I'm going to make over the next few weeks is stuff that I've actually done myself. I mean, I've done the Twitter threads, I've done the articles, I've done the podcasts, obviously the live shows now. And, sitting there and looking back at it, I went from, doing Facebook stuff to joining a Facebook group to having 24,000 members in this Facebook group and being the head podcast of this Facebook group, which is exactly how Sal Lido found me and brought me over to Twitter, which Twitter, by the way, has been a lot more supportive overall. But when I got my way over to Twitter, I ended up hopping onto 3 separate companies and producing at least 2 articles per week for all those companies. It was something where I was grinding day in and day out. And although you don't need to do that, if you're just doing it for the fun of it, or you're just doing it because you want to try and make it, but you're not, you still got a full-time job, you got kids you got to worry about, stuff like that, it's cool. It's absolutely 100% cool. You don't have to sit there and grind as hard, but it is going to take you a little bit longer. Just keep doing it, keep doing you. And even if you write an article per month, you're still improving yourself. You're still helping out the company that you're writing with, or you're sitting there and you're building yourself a resume essentially. So just keep doing it. Now, I will say when I first started, things were ugly. I already talked about how many I said, how many times I messed up. Like, it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. And my article that I sent, and my first one I ever sent in to Jacob over there with Dynasty Happy Hour, I literally sent him in like the second paragraph, all caps, going all the way across the screen as if I was yelling at him. And he's like, oh, hell no. He literally marked up my article like it was a 3-year-old, with a crayon, just going through and scratching through everything. I'm pretty sure I might have had 1 sentence that made it through the end that was unscathed. That's cool, because we're learning, we're trying to progress. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to put a guidelines article on my page, not even an article. I'm going to make a separate page for everybody that wants to learn on how to write. I'm going to do it on fantasyintervention.com. I'm going to put a page up there that should be up by Monday, and it's going to have all of our writing standards for fantasy intervention and what our writers are looking to do. So that way, if you guys need a little bit of guidance and you're not used to writing, you guys can have an opportunity to learn our guidelines and what we go by. Now, every company is different, but at least you can understand, the basis of how to write if you're looking to do that. Now, with that being said, not all companies are going to bring you on. I mean, we're sitting there, we just brought on about 10 people that are in a training program. They're working their way through, learning all of our guidelines and whatnot, learning how to record, learning how to write, doing all that stuff. We're probably not going to end up expanding again for another 4 to 6 weeks. So there are other companies out there. Let me actually pull this up on Twitter, because I have a few of them that I reached out to, and they told me to, let everybody know that they're interested in bringing people on. We have the ones that I already wrote down. We've got Dynasty Viper over there with Cal and Matt Donnelly. They're looking to pick some people up. That's Dynasty Vipers. We have, Christian over there, Christian Williams over there on Twitter with the Colt. We have King Fantasy Sports as well. And then we have a Fighting Chance. I know that they're looking for people along with, give me a second, I probably should have had this up. God, we got a whole bunch of people. The Fantasy Sackos, Sackos is another one. We have, let's see. Yeah, the Fantasy Coaches podcast. It's Coaches Fantasy over there on Twitter. We've got Tommy Moe. I believe he might be looking for somebody with the company that he's with. DFS_IDP if you're into IDP stuff. I already talked about Fantasy Football Sackos. That's the FF Sackos on Twitter. We have, let's see, ATB Sports Net over there on Twitter. We've got Sideline Squib Podcast. We've got, I already said King Fantasy Sports. Fighting Chance, that's FC Fantasy Sports on Twitter. So yeah, there's a ton of companies that are looking for writers. They're looking for new people that want to grow, that are inspired, that want to do something crazy. So although we're not looking currently, there are plenty of companies out there that are looking right now. So please go check them out over there on Twitter. And check us out. Join our circle _. Once again, that's join our circle _. I might actually do a list of companies that are looking to bring on new people that I'm going to put on the site as well below our writing expectations. So yeah, that'll be pretty cool, right? I'll do that for you guys. I don't mind. Either way, if you don't land the spot, maybe they fill up, maybe, your writing style really didn't fit what they were trying to do. Still keep improving, still keep writing, still keep comparing yourself and what your articles are doing for, other things. Like, for example, a big mistake that I notice a lot of times is when people write, they end up using wide receivers. Instead of saying wide receivers and spelling it out, they write WR. And that's not proper writing over there in, I guess, fantasy land or football land. So make sure that you guys are kind of comparing the minor details, especially when it comes to stylistically, that would apply to your articles that apply to other people that are in the industry. Just compare, try and get better if that's something you're looking to do. That's the writing side of things. If you're doing podcasts, I'm going to bring in a few experts over the weeks, not only with podcasts, but with writing as well, as to where they're going to answer recording questions, audio questions, SEO questions for, trying to promote your podcast, how to make your way up to the top of the charts for the podcast. I'm going to bring in experts all over the board because I've been networking like crazy over the past 2 weeks. So it's been something as to where people are actually inspired to come on and help other people get up there. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that aspect. Now, once again, just for the people that are just now joining, make sure you guys go hit youtube.com/fantasyintervention, youtube.com/fantasyintervention. So that way you don't miss out on any aspect of these articles coming or these episodes coming up. We're going to keep progressing and we're going to keep working our way through these articles as we move forward, episodes as we move forward. So for the mics that I have, I ended up buying a soundboard, which I probably didn't need as much because you can do a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. But this mic, it's a newer, I believe that's how you say it. It's NEEWER, and it's a NW700. So if you go look that up on Amazon, I think it's anywhere between 30 and 50 bucks. That's literally all you need to start up a podcast outside of something like GarageBand, which is, I didn't even know what it was a year and a half ago. No clue how to operate it or anything. Learned how to operate it, learned how to edit, learned how to do all that stuff, add intro music, add outro music, do all that kind of crazy stuff in the course of a couple months. But yeah, just go buy a mic. Go get a mic and just get started with it. Yeah, 50 bucks. If you're going to need a hosting platform as well, I use SoundCloud and figured out that SoundCloud is not the right way to go. It took me about a year and a half to figure that out, but SoundCloud actually does not promote podcasts. So you can't even make money off of them behind the scenes. So yeah, I wasted about a year and a half. Don't make that same mistake that I made and go with something like Anchor. I believe Buzzsprouts also offers something along those lines, but you're going to need a platform in order to upload your podcast to, and then they end up sharing it to multiple other platforms such as Google Play, Apple iTunes, Spotify, those type of things. I know that Anchor is the one that we decided to go with. It's free for you, like we said. They can also get you in with affiliates and people that can help you make money. So that's obviously an important thing, is to support your addiction. You're going to have some money for that. So Anchor podcasts help you do that. That's the route that I would go. If anybody else has any other recommendations in the comments, please make sure that you give us a shout, or go ahead and give everybody a shout out as to what you use and how you can help everybody else out. So let's see. On to, regardless of how you start, whether it's articles, podcasts, anything like that, the most important thing that you guys need to keep in mind and take note of is interaction. And it's not just any kind of interaction, because anybody can go onto Twitter and just start, trolling people and making noise. The most important thing is positive interaction, positive being the key word. Sure, like I said, you can debate, but who wants to come home and sit there and argue with their wife or significant other, all day long? Like, who wants to deal with any of that kind of stuff when you're sitting there and you look at a post that you made, you did a bunch of hard work, and all you see is somebody saying, oh, I don't know if I would go that route. I like somebody else better. Oh, I like this player better. I like that player. It's like, dude, like, they made a post about it. All right. There's certain ways that you can debate with people without debating, but you have to keep in mind that a lot of these bigger names in the industry have been doing this for 4 or 5 years now. They've been in this industry and they've had to debate and fight with people on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever it is, almost every single day. It's exhausting. It really is. And I'm not even a big personality and I hate dealing with it. So with that being said, there are ways to interact and get a positive response from people. And I think it's extremely important when it comes to social media and trying to get your name out there that you promote and build the right way. Keep in mind, we're building relationships, right? We're just not sitting there and doing shout outs and trying to, get people to follow us. And we're building relationships that are going to help us get to the next level. And I don't think people realize that enough. I think that people sit there and they just acknowledge that our voice could be heard by 50 people, but who's actually going to follow them and who's going to help them out in the long run? One of the best connections I ever made was actually with at FF Daddy or Daddy's Home FF, which is Mike over there. Let me go ahead and pull up his handle. He's sitting there and he posts a lot about stickers. Meanwhile, I'm posting a lot about analytics side of things. So he's sitting there and I was trying to grab some of the bigger names that would take notice of some of the bigger stats. Meanwhile, he's sitting there and grabbing some of the smaller people that are new followers and adding them to our team. So it's been a very, great partnership, but it all was caused because we just had a normal interaction on Twitter that was very positive overall and a very normal conversation that, was genuine. And we ended up going on a podcast together. Before you know it, Fantasy Intervention was born. So some of the best partnerships can start on stuff like Twitter, like Instagram, like Facebook, but just make sure that you have positive interactions with that. Now, a lot of people, you don't want to sit there and just, kiss a guy's ass or kiss a girl's ass all day and say how great you are. That's not what it's about. It's about providing content. It's about providing some sort of substance with the conversation. Like, I don't want to sit there and just go through and be like, oh, you're right. Oh, you're right. Oh, you're right. Yeah, no, of course not. Come on. But I also don't want to go through and create arguments. So you got to create conversation. How do you do that? How do you do that? Because arguing with somebody constantly is a complete turnoff. You don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with that. It's just a pain in the ass. So with that being said, pose interesting perspectives by questioning concept and proposing a solution without directly challenging. Once again, that's pose interesting perspectives by questioning the concept and proposing a solution without directly challenging. There's plenty of ways to do this. There are plenty of ways to disagree. There are plenty of ways to create questions without being a negative Nancy, without turning somebody off, essentially. And sitting there and looking at it, like earlier in the season, I was dead wrong about David Montgomery. So I'm going to talk about this experience real quick with David Montgomery because I was dead wrong. I didn't think he was going to perform. I didn't think that he had the offensive line. I didn't think he was talented enough. And honestly, I didn't take into account certain things. So if somebody sat there and they came into my thread and they're like, you're wrong, look at the schedule. Like, I don't want to hear that I'm wrong first off. I went through a lot of work, put together a lot of numbers, and made a educated decision as to which side I was going to hop on. Obviously, I was wrong because I didn't take into certain accounts. Now, the people came on and said I was wrong just right off the bat, or are you crazy, or go look at the schedule. Yes, I could see the schedule. I can see the schedule. It's right in front of me. I can see how easy that schedule is. That's cool. That's fine. It's no big deal, but I'm not going to respond to you. However, if somebody came on, right, and sat there and talked about how, they wanted to factor in the receptions being a bigger part of the game because Tariq Cohen wasn't going to be there. And the fact that they allowed the teams that they faced allowed some of the most receptions to the running back position on the schedule, along with the fact that Cordell Patterson, although he was more efficient than David Montgomery, might not get as much of a workload because they might want to go to a one running back system. Then we could have had a little bit of a debate because I'm sitting there looking at the fact that they've never used a one running back system and Cordell Patterson was more efficient. So I would actually converse in something like that. You can disagree with me without being a jackass and trying to make me look bad. It's just sitting there, and first you have to acknowledge to the fact of what I'm talking about, and then you propose a question that makes me think. It's a very simple process, but yet still people don't get it. You have to pose an interesting perspective and then go from there. Now, the other way is, let's just see where I'm at. Hey, I'm listening, right? But you see my aspects. So it's all about how you start it. I get where you're coming from. but have you considered XYZ? Have you considered some other question? By acknowledging that you get where this person is coming from, this bigger personality is coming from, they're already saying, okay, cool, he's listening to me, he understands where I'm coming from, but did I check into this angle or this angle? And once again, it's going to make somebody think. Now, the other way is by sitting there and messaging them privately. And typically, I don't message bigger names privately, but if there's somebody that might have a little bit more followers than you, or you're on Facebook and maybe it's somebody that might be an influential person on your Facebook group, I would sit there and message them privately because I don't want to make them look like a jackass once again. So you message them. But the thing with the messaging is you don't go in there with an intention to have a full-on fantasy conversation. This is just your intro. This is your way to build up a relationship. So typically, if you're messaging, make sure you're messaging someone that you want to be involved with later and propose, hey, we should talk about this on a show sometime. Hey, I would like to actually write an article and get your input on this sometime. Just keep that in mind. The third way and the last way is to retweet, acknowledging a positive, as to what they actually perceived, but then also offering your opinion. Sometimes if it's good enough of an opinion or enough perspective, then you'll actually get a comment from that person and boom, that's how you start a relationship. But interacting is crucial regardless of how you do it. It's absolutely crucial. Getting your name out there and doing it the right way is the most important part. Because if you interact in a negative way, it's going to turn people off. It's going to sit there and you're going to end up having more people that want to get away from you than actually want to help you. And it's kind of funny because we talked about, Daddy Some FF from Mike over there, who has such a positive influence that he doesn't even put out football stats sometimes. He just puts out posts about stickers. And before you know it, it ends up hitting and gets, 1,000 or 1,000,000 impressions, wherever the hell you hit, Mike. It's sitting there and having that positive feedback that actually gets you more followers. And each tweet that you put out, every single time that you put out a tweet or a comment, it's an opportunity that can open up a window. So you have to keep that in mind. If you're sitting there and you're promoting negative tweets or you're commenting negative stuff, what kind of opportunities are you opening up? Are you opening up negative opportunities, or are you opening up positive opportunities where people are going to want to work with you in the future? And it's absolutely crucial in order to make sure that you're seizing or providing every single positive opportunity. So that way you can find your way in with a bigger company or potentially business partner. Anyways, guys, that's going to be my first episode. Like I said, relatively quick. Next week, I'm going to try and dive into writing, I believe. It's either going to be that or podcasts. And we're actually going to have a guest on to go a little bit deeper to give you guys some behind the scenes information as to, whether it's writing and trying to get in with companies and what companies are looking for. I want to get on Dennis, obviously, from Dynasty Nerds, who's an editor over there. And he kind of, scans through all the articles and the writers before they come through. I want to get on with Dennis. I want to get on with Garrett Price and what they're looking for over there at Dynasty Nerds. I want to get on with Jacob and possibly we'll see if I can actually get him scheduled. But Tyler from Dynasty Happy Hour, I want to try and get on with those two guys possibly and see if they talk about what they were looking for with writers and kind of dissect these articles, kind of dissect like what we're looking for. With the podcast side of things, I've got Steven over there with Fantasy Intervention, who also works with Shy City Sports as a podcaster. He does excellent things behind the scenes, and he's been blowing my mind over the past month or so. He's been doing excellent stuff for Fantasy Intervention, so I want to get him on with me. And I have a few other people in the industry that I want to bring on who have kind of made their name through podcasts. I want to talk about live shows. I want to talk about Twitter threads. I want to talk about all that stuff. So each episode is going to address something different. And then once we hit that entry-level base, we're going to go and we're going to take our next step up and talk about what it's like to get from that the 200 follower range on Twitter or the 200 listener range for your podcast and how you actually step it up to that next level. So I appreciate you guys for tuning into the first episode. Please let me know what you think. Let me know what you like. If you liked it, make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes by going to youtube.com/fantasyintervention. Hit subscribe. Make sure you guys go check out our page at @joinourcircle_, at @joinourcircle_ on Twitter. Fantasy football discussion. Love you guys over there on Facebook. And of course, you have fantasyintervention.com. Once again, that's fantasyintervention.com to go check out all of our writers, all of our content, what we're doing. Once again, we will be putting up our writing standards as a separate page over there, along with other people who are looking to bring on writers if you're somebody new. Thank you guys once again for listening, and thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.